Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another edition of our Justice and Peace's guest speaker series as we've continued to talk with paralegal and lawyer bencher candidates about the upcoming elections. As always, the views and opinions are of the candidates alone. They don't reflect me, Justice and Peace's, Trials College, or any other education institution or organization that I'm affiliated with. Continuing on this evening, we have Antoine joining us. Antoine, first of all, thanks so much for taking the time to speak with me. Perhaps you can tell us a little bit more about yourself.
All right, thanks, JP, for having me. I have to say thank you for, making this possible for all the sort of venture candidates to come on and talk about themselves and their platforms. I've learned a lot from watching the video, so thank you for that. Again, I'm Antoine Collins. For those of you who don't know me, I practiced law in the United States and Canada for over the past 19 years. After graduating in 2002 from the University of Illinois, Chicago School of Law, I began my legal career as an assistant state's attorney for the Baltimore City State's Attorney's Office. There, I attended court on a daily basis. I represented the state of Maryland in prosecuting hundreds of cases before all levels of the courts there and the grand juries. I prosecuted cases ranging from minor thefts to drugs. However, the bulk of my work was centered around prosecuting felony child abuse and domestic violence cases. Subsequently, I joined one of Baltimore's top law firms, defending workers' compensation cases. I handled all sort of phases of workers' compensation litigation. I have been a principal lawyer in a small litigation firm. I moved to Canada. I went through the NCA process, and after being called to the Ontario bar in 2011, I ran a solo practice, mostly focusing on solicitors' work. And currently, I am an adjudicator with the Refugee Protection Division of the Immigration and Refugee Board of Canada, where I make well-reasoned decisions on refugee claimants who are applying for protection here in Canada. And I guess alongside of that, additionally, is that I'm still, actively involved within the Ontario legal community. So currently, I sit as a trustee for the Ontario Bar Association Foundation. I act as the chair for the foundation's Chief Justice Fellowship in Legal Ethics and Professionalism Studies. I'm past co-chair of the OBA Institute, as well as past member of the governance and past chair of the quality committees. I am also a trustee for the County of Carleton Law Association, the CCLA. I volunteer for Pro Bono Ontario. I've also taught paralegals evidence law at Algonquin College. And moreover, I am the president of the Ottawa chapter of the Canadian Association of Black Lawyers, where I am committed to legal excellence and reinvesting in the community through a multitude of events that promote academic and professional excellence and the advancement of issues of equality and diversity among the bar and the judiciary. So that's just a little bit.
Well, thanks, Antoine. I guess then with all of that, the next question here is you want to add the Law Society of Ontario bencher to your resume there. So why are you running for bencher in this upcoming election?
So JP, listen, the Law Society of Ontario is responsible for governing the legal profession here in Ontario, including setting the standards for legal training, overseeing professional conduct, and the making sure and ensuring that all Ontarians have access to competent legal services. Let's be clear. The legal profession has traditionally been dominated by a homogeneous group of individuals, and I firmly believe that it's time to increase diversity and representation. It's time that we had BIPOC voices heard, not only within the profession, but having seats and voices at the table of our governing bodies. And, as a Black lawyer myself, I understand the unique challenges and perspectives that BIPOC individuals face in the legal profession. And we need to ensure that our legal profession and its governing body accurately reflects the communities we serve by inviting and elevating the voices that have been historically marginalized from marginalized groups. So if elected, I will try my best to actively work and promote to create sort of a diverse and inclusive spaces within the Law Society. And that can be including establishing and seeking out resources that support networks of BIPOC licensees. I'm committed to ensuring that BIPOC voices are heard, valued, and respected. As can be seen through the work that I've done with on a lot of the boards that I sit on, or through cable, or through the diversity, equity, and inclusion work that I do at the IRB, I am dedicated to advancing our profession through what I hope is a voice of practicality. It is imperative that those who hold these sort of leadership position, they're able to possess that sort of practical knowledge and the ability to make decisions that are grounded in reasoning and common sense. Is it not reasonable and practical to pay an articling student minimum wage? Is it not reasonable or practical to have stable funding for our law libraries or stable funding for legal aid? And I think that all of these issues have a higher impact on our marginalized groups and that are trying to get into the profession, stay in the profession, or advance in the profession. Electing a bencher, we need to start, make sure that we elect benchers who are in tune with those sort of issues and, that are open to sort of an honest dialogue. This will help, I think, maintain the, integrity of the judicial system. It will hold us accountable to the profession. So ultimately, I think that the right choices can be made by a practical voice of reason, which in turn can facilitate the proper functioning of the Law Society, and it will help us really work toward our mandates.
Now, Antoine, in terms of maybe some specific goals in that frame there, what are some of the things there, if elected, that you'd like to bring to the discussion and in what you've just highlighted there, and maybe some specific, something to look more of what the Law Society should be doing to be more reflective, as you said, of the licensees?
I really think that we have to start with sort of our younger folks too. I think there needs to be we need to do more community engagements. So I would say, for instance, with the issue of sort of minimum wage for articling students, that we need to be reaching out to, the sort of recent new calls to see how the articling went. We need to start reaching out to other stakeholders, sort of our principal articles, and see what they need in order for us to facilitate that. I don't think that we do a lot of, we need to do more, let me say, community and stakeholder engagement in order for us to come to some solid conclusions, right? So I think that's the first thing that I would try to focus on. But at the end of the day is, I want to, if elected, get in there and sort of see how things are run, get a peek behind the curtain to see why we are making certain decisions and why we are following certain mandates. I think that's what, if you haven't been in Butcher before, you definitely need to know exactly how it's ran before you can make some solid decisions. I think people are getting elected because they have a viewpoint and a stance. This is sort of my ideology, but when it comes to solid concrete, what we can and cannot do, I think we need to be in those seats before we can, have a solid plan on what we can achieve and what we can and cannot do.
Now, you brought up ideologies there, and certainly we're talking a lot about in the BIPOC communities, right? In terms of, again, reflection, doing some of that advocacy there. But there's certainly been points brought up about could this stuff be done? As you mentioned, you're on cable, right? Or SABA, FACL, any other organization that could be sort of looking at taking the reins or shared reins, or does that need to be coming from the Law Society in terms of that positioning, the messaging, the studies, data, everything? Is it something that should be in their purview, or is that something that should be done with some of these other organizations, or is it a combination? Or what are your thoughts there on kind of how should this be all sort of run?
With sort of the DEI issues in particular, I think it should be done by both. I think one of the law society's mandates is, competence, making sure that we have competent licensees. And I think in order to have competent licensees that are going to practice and govern in the best interest of the public, that they need to sort of understand what's going on with the people that we serve. Throughout my career, I've been strongly guided by my commitment to public service. When I look at my legal career, I look at it through the matrix of being a public servant, and in sort of all of the legal matters and cases in which I've, either acted as a lawyer, either bezier, solicitor, or even an adjudicator. I've sought to treat every person with dignity, fairness, respecting their diversities, unique qualities, and experiences. I aim to, discharge my responsibilities with integrity and to reflect the core values in all the work that I do. So many, for me, many of the cases that I have seen dealt with domestic violence, child abuse, refugee flight, important and at times very heart-wrenching, and helping to deliver justice while maintaining, public confidence and integrity of the judicial process and keeping our citizens safe is meaningful work. And I think that is part of the LSO's mandate, that we ensure that our licensees are able to, dispense their work in that way.
Yeah, because I mean, when that comes up in terms of competence, right, on sort of the different candidates I've talked to, kind of looking at this issue of competence either being focused on making sure you don't got your fingers in the trust accounts unfairly or illegally, versus you brought up perhaps there's cultural competence, right, in terms of there's been I think certainly decisions where that should be partaking and having the knowledge thereof of your clients and those backgrounds relevant for things like bail hearings and sentencing regimes and stuff like that. Gladue comes to mind. So again, what should the law society be doing there? Yeah.
It was just the case recently that came out where the judge took into consideration systemic racism when doing a sentencing for a Black person that was accused of a crime. So I really think that is important. The way that we practice law, the way that we are adjudicating, the way that decisions are being made, the way judgments are coming forth is changing. And it is imperative that we all are sort of culturally aware of our citizens, right? These are the people that we're serving. We need to actually know what's affecting them in order for us to actually properly, have access to justice, for them to have access to justice, and for us to properly represent and advocate for our people, for our citizens.
Now, I mean, that kind of gets into perhaps the big maybe elephant in the room in this upcoming election is that you have two groups, right? I think 36 and 45 strong with the paralegal and lawyer candidates between them, right? I mean, you had the initially the stop group from the last time. I think 22 of them ran under that sort of position there to remove the statement of principles. In response, you have the Good Governance Coalition saying that we have to create our coalition to prevent vote splitting and vote for all of us. And then if we're elected, then we may look at electoral reform and doing away with slates altogether. Now, I know you're running without any affiliation to either of them. I mean, what are your thoughts, first of all, just as an unaffiliated candidate in the election of how all of this is working out? And perhaps, the second part to that is there anything wrong with the setup, or have you given any thought to perhaps electoral reform of how we should be picking our benchers? I mean, the voter turnout is pretty low. I mean, less than 30% the last time. So I know there's a lot in there, but maybe you can sort of try to unpack it there. Yeah.
Yeah. So I ran for bencher in 2019 as well. And I mean, I think slates have been around for a while, but I partnered up with another solo practitioner. And so we ran our campaign together, and I've seen it happen before where other candidates, say senior lawyers, are running with more junior lawyers, getting their foot in the door, and some people have been successful, some people haven't. But I still think that they're not going in saying that this is the way that we're going to vote. We're not voting together. We're not voting as a block. We are independent candidates. But I feel that this person is aligned with my core values, right? When I ran with my partner, we were both doing real estate. We were both solicitors, so we were going in with the view that there's not a lot of solicitors uh, being at the table at the governance table. Let's change that. There are certain issues that we have to deal with that we don't feel like being addressed. In terms of the stop slate at the time, they ran on a single issue, and that was to get rid of the statement of principles, which they were successful in doing. But from then on, the rest, from what I can see, was a bit of a mess throughout the 3.5 years that they've been there. And to be honest, they've tried to sort of dismantle all DEI initiatives, and that really can happen. And I'm really hopeful that our licensees will look at that. A lot of people weren't happy with the statement of principles. It might have been putting lipstick on a pig, but it did get people to talking, which I was for it. I was like, fine, if people are talking about it, let's talk about it. Let's figure out ways to make it better. Could something have been done better? Perhaps. But I don't. There's plenty of studies out there that shows that systemic racism exists within our country, within within the law society, within the legal profession. There's nothing, we sit in a privileged place, and there's nothing that makes Ontario lawyers any different from any place in any place else. So I hope that the people that come out to vote are actually looking at those issues and truly believe that our profession is better when we have diverse voices at the table. In terms of, the counter slate or coalition, or whatever they call themselves, there are some, I get it. I get it why they're doing it. I, believe in the premise behind it, the messaging. We all want, civility at convocation. We all want to make sure that we're using the money properly. We all want those things, but I'm not sure if they've missed some opportunities with the coalition. That they claim to be diverse, but are they really? There's no one on that coalition that can speak for me. There's no Black males on that coalition. So I'm wondering, if they really looked into it and thought about it, and how they actually picked their candidates. A lot of the people that I talked to, a lot of the ones on the coalition, we just don't know. So will they get the vote? Probably. I'm not voting for a Black group of people, right? And to be honest, the coalition started off by saying that they vote for us, vote for the coalition, vote for any 40 of these people individually, just make sure you vote for these 40 people. But since saying that they're not a slate, to me, that's a slate. If you want us to, you're saying vote for me, but also vote for everyone else, that's a slate. And now they're saying, like, once we get in, we won't vote as a block. And I was like, well, your track record hasn't been that transparent. So I don't know about that. So we'll see. And some of the people on the coalition are, amazing. Like, one of my mentors is on the coalition, and he has my support 100%. But we'll see how it all turns out in the end.
But is that the way to sort of pick our board or the benchers? First of all, there's like 53 in total when you factor in the 5 paralegals, the 8 lay benchers, and they're all kind of turnover all at once, right? So think about from an organizational perspective, 53 potentially brand new people on board. I know there's a few. I don't even know if it's a majority would be of the incumbents if they all got elected. I think about there's about 25 or so, or 30 maybe approximately. Even if they were all elected, there'd still be a lot of turnover. And then just the size, right? 53 people on a board of directors. I mean, have you given any thought to how that's done? I mean, I think even yourself, you talk about being out in Ottawa, but I think you're a Toronto candidate because of where your
Yeah.
address is. But then who is voting for you could be anywhere. Um, so these are some of the things that have come up over the 70 or so interviews I've had. What are your thoughts on all of this?
You think, well, I'm open to sort of revisiting or visiting sort of, election protocols and how it should be ran. I mean, this is a pretty large governing body. And it would be nice to know why it's set up that way. Toronto has a majority of, 20 votes. I guess is the biggest hub where all the lawyers are coming from. Then we have 8 different regions where things are broken down. I've always found it to be a bit odd that, we have our East region people, then Southeast and all those other ones, but are they working for constituents, or is it getting very sort of looking more like a political atmosphere, which I think that's not what it was meant to do. But at the end of the day, no matter, you got 40 elected benchers, I think that we're all trying to, if elected, work in the best interest of the public to make sure we're producing competent lawyers. So you can be a competent lawyer in the East or in Toronto. But I think we're all writing the same bar exam. We're all supposedly having to article, or and get that same experience. So could some change be made? Probably. I would need to sort of do more research and sit down with other folks and see what other options there could be. And in terms of sort of corporate memory, I think that's maybe why I think there's some sort of honorary benchers or some people that don't vote, and they bring sort of that corporate memory in. Maybe I think the Law Society is maybe relying on sort of incumbent benchers being voted back in to pass down that sort of corporate memory and sort of train and to the newer benchers that are elected. Yeah, I mean, I think that there is some room for improvement when it comes to sort of election reform.
You mentioned articling there again. I think you had mentioned it at the very beginning, and sort of wanted to follow up on that as it's been an issue. I mean, generally, or within BIPOC communities, as you brought up, especially NCA process and going into getting licensed and everything. So what are your thoughts there with respect to the articling, and there was the whole topic of minimum wage compensation, and even getting through that from law school, all of the debt, and getting into the profession, and starting to pay fees. So maybe you can sort of espouse a little bit on that point.
Yeah, I think it's an issue that we need to address. Of course, articling students shouldn't work for free, right? So there should be a minimum wage, and I think that's in. Then we start addressing what might happen thereafter, and that means we have to do some community engagement. Let's talk to folks that have just finished their articles. Let's talk to our articling principals and all the other stakeholders to see if there is a better option. I came from a jurisdiction where I went to law school in the States. After our 3 years of law school, we went straight to you took the bar exam and you went to work. If you found a job. Is that a better system? Like, maybe we need to be reaching out to sort of the law schools. I'm not, to see, are there any practical components to their law courses? Every time, I mentor a lot of law students, and I do ask everyone, I ask the questions like, did law school prepare you to be a lawyer, or are you in that mindset? And that's, and most of them say that it did not, which I find very shocking, because one of our first weeks in law school, people, we were told that your lawyers, you start thinking like a lawyer. That didn't mean go out and practice law, but it means get your mindset into that frame of mind, right? Yeah, I think that we're gonna have to reach out to stakeholders to see and have those conversations to see if there is a better sort of alternative to articling, or how we can make articling better. And to be honest, I didn't have to article when I got called to the bar here in Ontario, and I don't know if I would have found an articling position, because I didn't go to law school here. I didn't have those connections to get in. So it might have been a different story for me if I didn't get that waiver. But it also left me still, again, not knowing people as an NCA student. How do I find a job? I I remember going to, when I first got called to the bar, just going to sit in the courthouse and sitting in the back of the courthouse, just sort of watching people and what they were doing. I shadowed some of the Crown attorneys for a while, but at the end of the day, because I had so much experience, I wasn't willing to take certain things. I wasn't willing to do some of the things that I had to do as like a junior associate. So I wind up opening up my own practice, right? And that's his own story. It's not cheap, it's expensive. Um, from starting your own practice to all the fees that you have to pay, and that's on top of sort of the fees that you pay to get to even get licensed here as an NCA student. So that, that needs to be looked at too, to see what we can do better, to see how we can make it a little bit more easier for our NCA students to come into and practice law here in Ontario. I mean, we have some really talented lawyers that have been trained outside of Ontario, and we're missing a lot of opportunities if we can't find an easier way for them to sort of migrate into the system like that.
Anton, it's great that we're talking about articling students and NCA students. So last couple questions here. First one is specifically for those students who are looking to come into the profession. Do you have any advice, any words of wisdom for them?
Yeah, be persistent, and I would say get involved. Don't be afraid to ask questions. How I really got started and, sort of getting involved into sort of the legal community here in Ontario is that I started volunteering at Pro Bono Ontario, right? I was able to work on some, substantive law. I was able to meet tons of uh, tons of lawyers. I met my mentor there. He gave me one, but he's like, go to the CCLA uh, conference, and I think it was the civil litigation conference, and that was probably the best $1,500 I spent, because I was able to make so many connections and people start referring work to me. And so I say get involved. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask people to be mentors. Like, people call me because I'm a cable president all the time and say, can we have a minute to 30 minutes for coffee or talk? And I'm always open to that. So get involved, be visible. Yeah. That would be my advice.
Antoine, last question here. And first of all, thanks again for taking the time to speak with me here today evening. For all the lawyers that may be listening to this, and they have up to 40 votes, as we talked about in the upcoming election, regardless of in Toronto or outside of Toronto, why should they use a vote for you, Antoine?
Okay, I guess I'll end on this note. I think that representation is important. I believe that representation of Black lawyers within the legal profession and our governing body is critical for promoting equal and fair treatment in the legal system. The diversity of perspectives and experiences that come from a greater representation can lead to a legal field that is more empathetic, that is more just, that is ultimately more effective in serving the needs of all the people that we serve. It can also create a more inclusive environment for the profession itself, providing opportunities for Black lawyers to excel and grow. So, just take a look at our judiciary. Blacks have been noted to be settled in Canada since 1603. And it wasn't until 1969 that our first Black judge was appointed to a court in Canada. And since that date, only 68 Black judges have been appointed throughout our courts in Canada. And that's despite 20% of Canada's population being non-white. And right now, only a handful of Indigenous, Black, and other visible minorities currently preside on the courts in which most of our judicial work takes place. Now, I know for me and the Black community and cable and the Black legal community, we're extremely honored and proud of the recent appointment of Chief Justice Tulloch, and that is definitely something to celebrate. But don't be fooled by the banners and the balloons, because there is definitely still work to be done. So in short, diversity in the legal system within our profession, within our governing body, is essential for promoting justice and improving outcomes for all the people that we serve. So at the end of the day, win or lose, I will always support and promote the need for a more enlightened and inclusive profession. So that's me. Hopefully I'll get your vote.
Thanks again so much, Antoine, and thanks for everyone for tuning in again. Take care, everyone.
Okay, thanks. Bye.